In 2025, we worked hands-on with 70 e-commerce brands from $50,000 a month to over $1 million a month. And the brands that scaled the fastest, well, they didn't necessarily have the biggest ad budgets. They didn't have better tech. They didn't have some secret ad trick. They simply built momentum. And this is one thing I've seen with our best performing brands, because most brands don't fail because they lack effort. Everyone's working hard. They fail because they never learn how to build momentum in their business. And at TVG, we believe the skill of building momentum is one of the most important skills you can develop as a founder. Because when momentum kicks in business, growth stops feeling forced. It truly compounds. And over the last 4 years of working with e-commerce brands, we've studied hundreds, if not thousands of e-commerce brands across different niches and product verticals. And what we found is that momentum isn't random. It just doesn't happen out of the blue. It's truly built from proper systems and understanding the whole picture. And so we boiled it down to 4 core marketing principles that we instill into the brands that we work with and that we see our most successful brands execute at a very high level. And when these 4 principles are aligned, growth becomes systematic. It's not guesswork anymore. So today I'm going to map out exactly what these principles are and show you how you can turn your brand into a machine that builds momentum. Number 1 is conversion-driven creative. You don't run an e-commerce product-based company. You simply run a marketing company. And here's what we've seen time and time again. A lot of these brands that we work with that are doing $8 to $10+ million a year, they're comfortable. They've got executives. They've got people who've been there before. They're running the same playbook that they ran in 2016, 2018. I was just looking at a brand this week that literally is doing millions a month, and you'd think, oh, they're good, they're doing well, but they are stuck behind and they're wondering why they're only scaling 2 to 5% year over year. And they're simply, doing the things that maybe it worked back then, but this is not 2018 anymore. This is not 2020 anymore. And in this Andromeda era, creative is the acquisition system. So we've seen this from brands that are startup all the way up to the 8-figure brands, is that creative is just not a priority, or at least they're not producing enough creatives to really keep up with this algorithm. So most legacy brands are just not testing creative enough. They'll say they are. They say, yeah, we have a creative system, we have in-house content, but when we really dig into their ad account, they're rotating the same concept. They're using the same angles, the same influencers, and the same polished brand shoots that worked years ago. And here's the crazy part. When we actually look at their ad accounts, 90% of their spend is going towards retargeting. 90! That means that they're not spending money to get new customers in the door. They're simply just spending on their existing customer base. And that's why they wonder why their growth is capped. If you're not consistently testing new creative to bring in new customers, you don't have an acquisition engine, and it boils down to your creative process. You just have a recycling system and just using old creative to retarget. Creative is the fuel of the vehicle. It's what gets you in front of new eyes. It's what earns attention, and it's what expands your audience. And if you don't crack that, nothing else matters. Second is optimize acquisition. Now let's connect that creative to the actual paid execution. Because creatives are paid, they are married. You must have good creative and you must have good media buying execution. If creative is the fuel, paid is just the distribution engine. But most brands are still optimizing for ROAS like it's the only thing that matters. They'll brag about a 4, 5, 6x ROAS. When you zoom out, you look at the blended CAC and it's rising. New customer acquisition is flat. Profit is volatile. And we've seen brands just dumping money into retargeting to inflate ROAS. And that doesn't grow the brand. That makes the dashboard look good. Oh, our ROAS is strong this month. But when we actually step in, the first thing we ask is, how many new customers are you actually acquiring? And what is your blended new customer acquisition cost? And what is your lifetime value? Because if paid isn't aligned with your real numbers, it's simply gambling. And when it is aligned, it's math. And that's a big difference, right? And when you have your acquisition dialed in, it's a math problem, and that makes a huge difference. Next is retention and retargeting. This is the one almost everyone sleeps on. Email feels boring, SMS feels boring, flows, email campaigns, all sounds boring, right? But this is the most profitable lever in your entire business. And the brands that are crushing it, they're obsessed with retention. Meanwhile, most brands are obsessed with chasing ROAS, looking at wholesale deals, retail expansion, looking at all these different things instead of nurturing their existing customer base. And when they talk about marketing, they talk about ads. Nobody's really considering what's our repeat customer rate, what's our second purchase timing, what's our 6-month lifetime value. So let's talk about your flows for a second. Flows are just automated messages that go out when someone buys for the first time. They abandon the cart, they doesn't repurchase, views a product, hasn't engaged in 60 days. It's the follow-up system. And most brands have a basic setup when it comes to their retention marketing and never touch it again. But what we tell our team all the time is you can always do more on email. You can test new angles. You can test new subject lines. You can test new offers. Sometimes we jump into an 8-figure brand and they have email set up, but they're just discounting their entire list. Is your retention strategy actually profitable, or are you just sending discounts to your list just to squeeze some cash? That is a short-term fix and causes a long-term problem because it conditions your audience to be focused on discounts. You do not want to be a discount brand. With proper retention strategy, email is where you can break down objections. You can reinforce brand positioning. You can test messaging, increase AOV, increase the frequency of purchases. And here's why this matters. If you increase your lifetime value, you can afford to pay more to acquire a customer. And in 2026, well, you have to pay more. It's more competitive than ever. It's more expensive to advertise. Costs are not going down. Testing costs us more. So if you don't build your lifetime value, if you're not retaining your customers, you cap your own scale. But what if you nail retention? What if you're absolutely crushing it? Well, it feeds the creative, it feeds the paid, it gives you margin so you can actually scale. And it becomes a flywheel that's working on autopilot for your brand. Now let's talk about expansion and scale. You must know your numbers. This is where it all comes together. A lot of brands get to where they are because maybe their product is great, they've been around for a while. The product might sell itself. That only gets you so far. And at some point you need financial discipline. And we've seen this from the small brands, the 7-figure brands, up to 8-figure brands. You need to know your blended new customer acquisition costs. You need to know your lifetime value, your contribution margin, your payback period, your marketing efficiency ratio. So many brands are flying blind. They've got maybe an ad agency, an email agency, you got freelancers, you got all these teams working on different channels, but nothing is working together. No one's owning the whole process. Everyone's reporting these different numbers. And as a founder, as a marketer, you're probably confused because why are all these channels reporting great metrics, great ROAS, and why aren't we scaling? It's because everyone's claiming credit and oftentimes there's over attribution happening. So you must look at the full picture. And so what we do is we look at the blended numbers. Yes, we look at in-platform data, but we want the big picture metrics because that tells us where do we need to pour in more investment? Where do we need to lean in? Where do we need to pull back in marketing spend? Because scale isn't let's just increase our ad budget this month. Scale is, do the numbers and metrics actually justify it? When you understand your numbers deeply, scaling becomes intentional. And that's the difference between growing fast for 6 months and building something that compounds for years, time and time again. So when we say alignment, this is what we mean. Creative brings in the new customers. You have a system for producing content. Paid distributes that content intelligently. Your retention increases that customer lifetime value, and finance and data is guiding all of your decisions. All tied together, not silos. That's how you break past this plateau. That's how you move from 7 figures to 8 figures comfortably to real scale. So here's the truth. Momentum isn't luck. It isn't some viral moment. It isn't some one winning ad, or it's not one big Q4, it's alignment. And when your creative is consistently bringing in new customers, when your paid strategy is tied to the real numbers, when your retention expands lifetime value, and when you understand exactly where to deploy capital, momentum builds. And once it builds, it starts to compound. And that's when scaling stops feeling stressful. And that's when you can stop guessing. That's when growth becomes predictable. Every brand is working hard. They're just pushing in different directions. So if you align these 4 principles, you stop pushing and you start accelerating. And if you want to know whether your brand is actually building momentum or it's spinning your wheels in the sand, then we'll show you. And that's why we offer our free core growth audit, where I jump into a brand, I understand your metrics, and we break down what are you doing for creative? What's your acquisition efficiency? How's your retention? And are you scaling with real metrics? And there's no pressure on this call. There's no obligation. Just lay back conversation, understand if you have room for growth. The worst case is you walk away from this call with clarity. The best case is we build a system that actually compounds. And if you're serious about building momentum instead of chasing tactics, then click the link down below and apply for that core growth audit today.